Christopher Hayes sat in the large amphitheater of the Galactic Institute. Around him were hundreds of beings from different worlds. Some had bodies made of crystal. Some had multiple tentacles. Some looked almost human, but with skin colors that shifted between blue and green. Christopher was the only human here. Professor Venn stood at the front of the room. Venn was a being made of pure crystal and light. His form floated above the ground, and when he spoke, his voice came from everywhere at once. He had been explaining the genetic code of different species for more than an hour. His explanation was exact and cold. He did not care about feelings or history. He only cared about facts and numbers. On the large screen behind Venn, the genetic code of many species appeared. Each species had its own pattern, like a fingerprint. The code showed the story of how each species evolved. It showed what they survived and what they became. When the human genetic code appeared on the screen, Christopher leaned forward. He had studied human genetics before coming to this meeting. He knew something was different about his species' DNA. He saw the amber-colored sections mixed with the blue. Most of the genetic codes on the screen were pure blue, but the human code had large amber parts. Venn pointed at the amber sections with a beam of light. These sections represent exogenous genetic material. This means DNA that came from outside the human body. Specifically, this DNA came from viruses that human ancestors encountered and survived. The amber sections show that 8% of human DNA comes from these viral infections. Christopher raised his hand. The room became quiet. All the eyes in the room turned toward him. Being the only human in a room full of alien species was not comfortable. But Christopher had been trained for this moment. He had come to the Galactic Institute to represent humanity. "Professor Venn," Christopher said, his voice clear and steady. "Why is that 8% important? You called it evolutionary debris, but it seems like a lot of DNA to come from viruses. Why did human species keep this viral DNA instead of removing it?" Venn's crystal body flickered. This question was not easy to answer. The other professors and observers in the room started making sounds with their mouths and their bodies. Some sounded like agreement. Some sounded like disagreement. Some sounded like confusion. Venn spoke again. "The amber material is found in 17 other carbon-based species. They all have similar viral integration. The percentage is simply the result of evolutionary chance. When a virus attacks a species, sometimes the species survives. When they survive, sometimes small pieces of the virus remain in their DNA. Over time, these pieces add up. It is not planned. It is not chosen. It is simply what happens." But Christopher was not satisfied with this answer. He had spent weeks preparing for this exchange program. He had read books about human history. He had learned about the Black Death that killed millions of humans. He had learned about Spanish flu that spread across the entire world. He had learned about COVID-19 that changed human civilization. Each time humans faced death. Each time, humans found ways to survive. Christopher stood up from his seat. "Professor, with respect, I think this is more than chance. When humans got sick, they did not just recover and forget. They changed. Their bodies learned. When a human survived a virus, their body kept a copy of that virus in their DNA. They kept it like a weapon or a tool. They kept it to prepare for the next time that same virus came back." An Andromedan delegate stood up. The Andromedans were an old species. They had been traveling through space for billions of years. Their bodies were tall and thin, and their skin changed colors based on their emotions. Right now, their skin was turning red. Red meant anger or strong disagreement. "Young human," the Andromedan said, "your species has been in space for only 100 years. You know nothing of how evolution works. Every species survives viruses. Every species has the same material in their DNA. It is not special. It is not important. It is simply a normal part of being alive. Christopher felt anger rise in his chest, but he controlled it. He had been trained to keep calm when others became angry. I understand that many species have this material, Christopher said. But look at the numbers. We have 8%. That is higher than almost all other species here. And look at the pattern. The newer the viral DNA in our code, the more organized it is. The older viral DNA is spread out and broken. But the recent viral DNA, from the last few thousand years, it is organized. It is planned. It is like we are not just surviving by accident. We are learning. We are studying what happens to us. We are recording that knowledge in our own bodies. Patricia Moore sat near Christopher. She was another human at the Institute. Patricia was a doctor and a scientist. She studied how the human body fights disease. Patricia nodded at Christopher. She understood what he was saying. A Zalathian observer made a sound that was like a high whistle. The Zalathians were known as the masters of genetic engineering. They had been changing their own DNA for millions of years. They understood genetics better than almost any species in the galaxy. If any species could understand what Christopher was saying, it would be them. The human raises an interesting point, the Zalathian said. We have records of the Spanish flu pandemic that hit human populations in 1918. We also have human genetic records from that same time. If the human's claim is correct, we should be able to see the viral DNA from that pandemic in modern human genetics. All eyes turned back to Ven. Ven's crystal body became very still. He was thinking very hard. This would require access to our complete genetic databases, Ven said slowly. And it would require careful analysis. The human's hypothesis is unusual, but it is not impossible. I will bring this matter before the Council's scientific division. Christopher sat back down. His heart was beating fast. He had just challenged one of the most respected professors in the entire galaxy. He had suggested that humanity might be different than every other species. He had suggested that humanity might have abilities that nobody had understood before. The meeting continued for another hour, but Christopher barely heard it. He was thinking about his own body. Inside his cells, inside his DNA, there were pieces of viruses. There were genetic memories of his ancestors fighting disease and death. There were thousands of years of human experience recorded at the level of his very cells. When the meeting finally ended, Patricia came to him immediately. "That was incredible," Patricia whispered. "Do you understand what you just said? If you are right, then human DNA is not just random. It is an archive. It is a library of survival." Christopher looked at the empty seat where Ven had been. "I do not know if I'm right," he said, "but I know that we need to find out. We need to understand what that 8% really means. Because if I am right, Patricia, then humanity is not just another species in the galaxy. We are something that nobody has ever seen before." That night, Christopher could not sleep. He thought about the genetic code on the screen. He thought about the amber color marking where human DNA had learned to survive. He thought about his ancestors living through plagues and wars, passing their knowledge down through their bodies to the future. Christopher woke early the next morning. Sleep had been difficult. His mind kept returning to the question he had asked in the amphitheater. Now he needed to find the answer. He needed proof. He went to Patricia's office before breakfast. Patricia was already there, looking at data on her computer screen. She had not slept much either. "I got permission to access the genetic database," Patricia said immediately. "I told them we needed to verify your question with evidence." The council agreed. They said if your theory has any truth to it, they need to know. Christopher and Patricia spent the entire day in the Institute's research center. The research center was a large building filled with computers and machines. Scientists from 100 different species worked here, studying the secrets of life itself. They pulled information on every species that had a genetic code on file in the Institute's database. They looked at the zoethians. They looked at the Kepler Council species. They looked at the Andromedans. They looked at the Kelith Collective. They looked at every major species in the galaxy. What they found made them both stop and stare at the screen. Christopher pointed at the numbers. The Zalathians have only 2% viral integration. The Kepler Council species range from 1 to 3%. The Andromedans have 5%, and they are billions of years old. They have had more time to collect this material than any other species. Patricia was typing quickly, pulling up more data. And look at the structure. In every other species, the viral DNA is scattered. It is broken into pieces. It is spread randomly across their chromosomes. Like junk. Like garbage that their body never cleaned up. But not in humans, Christopher said. He was looking at the human genetic code again. The amber sections that showed viral DNA were different. They were not random. They were organized. The oldest sections, the viral DNA from thousands of years ago, were fragmented and spread out. But the newer sections, the viral DNA from the last few hundred years, were organized and structured like they had been carefully placed. Patricia pulled up a specific file. Her hands were shaking. Look at these sequences, she said. These are from the Spanish flu pandemic. We identified them in human genetics 50 years ago. But look at the organization. This is not random viral DNA. This is the record of a specific immune response. This is how a human body learned to fight Spanish flu. Christopher studied the screen. The viral DNA from the Spanish flu was not just a piece of the virus. It included the structure of the human immune response. It included the pattern of antibodies that human bodies had created to defeat the virus. It was like the human DNA was keeping a detailed record of the battle. If this is from Spanish flu, Christopher said slowly, then we should be able to find the same pattern in modern humans. We should be able to find immunity to Spanish flu encoded in the genetic code of people born decades after that pandemic ended. Patricia was already running the analysis. The computer processed the data. Minutes passed like hours. Then the results appeared on the screen. Every single modern human in database had the genetic marker for Spanish flu immunity. Even humans born 80 years after the pandemic had ended still carried the genetic code for fighting Spanish flu. Their ancestors had survived the disease. Their ancestors had kept the knowledge of survival in their DNA, and that knowledge had been passed down through generation after generation. This is impossible, Patricia whispered. This should not be possible. But it was possible. Because it was real. Christopher and Patricia spent the next hours pulling more data. They looked at tuberculosis, which had killed millions of humans over hundreds of years. The genetic code for fighting tuberculosis was in every human. They looked at smallpox, which had been one of the most deadly diseases in human history. The genetic code for defeating smallpox was preserved in human DNA. They looked at the Black Death, which had killed a third of the human population centuries ago. The pattern of immune response to the Black Death was still coded in human genetics. Humanity had not just survived disease. Humanity had learned from disease. Humanity had recorded that learning in its own DNA, and humanity had passed that learning to every child born after that. Patricia prepared a detailed report. The report showed the comparison. It showed that humans had 8% of their genome dedicated to viral adaptation. It showed that this viral DNA was organized and structured, not random. It showed that the organization had increased over the last few thousand years. It showed that humans were not just surviving viruses by luck. Humans were learning from viruses and encoding that knowledge into their genetic code. When Patricia submitted the report to the Council's Biological Analysis Division, the response came quickly. Within 2 hours, the report had been reviewed by Professor Venn himself. Within 4 hours, the report had been forwarded to the main Galactic Council Administrative Office. By the next morning, Christopher received a message. The message came from the Council's Chief Administrative Officer. The message said that the findings were significant. The message said that the Council wanted to discuss the implications. The message said that an emergency session would be called. Christopher read the message 3 times. An emergency session meant the entire Council would gather. An emergency session meant that every major species government would be represented. An emergency session meant that what he and Patricia had discovered was not a small thing. It was a big thing. It was a thing that would change how the galaxy understood humanity. Patricia was in the hallway outside the message center. She had received the same message. "We did it," she said. "We proved your theory. We showed that human DNA is different. We showed that humans have been encoding survival knowledge for thousands of years." But Christopher felt cold inside his chest. Proving the theory was one thing. Understanding what the galaxy would do with this information was another thing entirely. "I wonder," Christopher said, "if they will see this as a strength or as a threat." Patricia did not answer, but he could see the worry in her eyes. She was wondering the same thing. That evening, Christopher went to his quarters to prepare for the emergency council session. He thought about what would happen. He thought about what the other species would think when they understood that humanity was different. He thought about the amber sections of his own genetic code, recording thousands of years of plague and survival. The galaxy was about to change. And it had all started with a simple question about 8% of human DNA. The council chamber was the largest room in the entire galaxy. At least, that was what people said. The room was so big that Christopher could not see the far walls. The ceiling stretched up so high that it disappeared into darkness. Around the chamber, arranged in circles, were seats for representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Today, every seat was filled. Christopher sat in the observation section, which was a small area on the side where guests could watch the council debate. He was not supposed to speak unless directly questioned, but he was here to answer questions about the research he and Patricia had completed. Patricia sat next to him. She had a folder with all the data. The data showed everything they had discovered about human genetic code. The council president stood. The president was a being who had seen thousands of years of politics. The president's name could not be pronounced by a human mouth, so everyone just called the president President 9. President 9 raised a hand, and the entire chamber became silent. "We have called this emergency session," President 9 said, "to discuss a discovery that has serious implications for galactic security and stability. The human delegates have presented evidence that the human species possesses a unique genetic capability. I will now open the floor for discussion." Immediately, the Andromedan delegate stood up. The Andromedan's skin was dark red, showing strong emotion. "This is exactly what we have been trying to prevent," the Andromedan said loudly. "Young species should not develop adaptive genetic capabilities. We have established clear development protocols for all species that join the galactic community. These protocols exist to prevent species from becoming too advanced too quickly. The humans have violated these protocols." Another voice called out. This was the Zalathian representative. The Zalathians had been silent until now. "I would like to suggest that violation is not the correct word. The humans did not create their genetic capability. They survived natural plague and disease. Their genetic adaptation occurred through normal evolutionary processes. The human species did not engineer this advancement. They lived through it. But the Andromedan representative was not satisfied. The result is the same. Humans now possess a genetic architecture that exceeds what other young species have achieved. The human genetic code is now comparable to species that are millions of years old. This creates an imbalance in the power structure of the galaxy. A Kepler Council representative stood. The Kepler Council was made up of several species that worked together. They had been in the galaxy longer than humans had been alive. I moved to restrict human access to genetic research and technology. If humans possess natural genetic advantages, we must prevent them from developing technological advantages to match those capabilities. Christopher felt Patricia's hand grip his arm. She was afraid. He could feel the fear in her grip. Then Kevin Baldwin stood up in the observation section. Kevin was the human political representative. He had not been supposed to speak. He had been supposed to stay quiet and let the council debate. But Kevin stood up anyway. "I will speak," Kevin said, his voice loud and clear. "I will speak because you are deciding the future of my species without understanding what you are discussing." President Nine looked at Kevin with surprise. "The human delegate has the floor," President Nine said. "Speak." Kevin walked to the center of the chamber. Being in the center of the chamber meant all eyes looked at you. It meant all the beings from all the different species could hear every word you said. It was a powerful and dangerous place to be. "You are treating humanity like we are a problem," Kevin said. His voice was controlled and steady. "That has been the way of this galaxy since humans first made contact 100 years ago. We are the young species. We are the ones who should not have made it this far. We are the ones who do not belong on an equal level with civilizations billions of years old. Am I correct?" Nobody answered. But Kevin was correct. Everyone in the chamber knew it. "But you do not understand what that 8% of our genetic code means," Kevin continued. "You see it as a threat. You see it as an unfair advantage. But it is not an advantage we created. It is not an advantage we engineered. It is the result of our species fighting to survive." Kevin pointed at Christopher. "When my species faced a plague, we did not have advanced medical technology. We did not have genetic engineering. We did not have any of the tools that you possess. We had only ourselves. We had only our determination to survive. We had only our willingness to care for the sick and learn from what was killing us." An Andromedan started to interrupt, but Kevin held up his hand. "Let me finish. My ancestors survived the Black Death, one plague, one moment in history. It killed millions, but the ones who survived, they did more than just recover and move on. They studied what happened to their bodies. They learned how to recognize the disease. They learned how to resist it. And they put that knowledge into their DNA so that their children and their grandchildren would be prepared." Patricia was standing now, too. She came to stand beside Kevin. "Every human who is alive today," Patricia said, "carries in their cells the genetic knowledge of thousands of years of plague and survival. We do not carry this knowledge because we are advanced. We carry it because we are survivors. We carry it because we refuse to die." The chamber was quiet. No one was arguing. No one was interrupting. Everyone was listening. "You fear this," Kevin said. "I can see it in your faces and your body language. You fear that humanity might become too strong. But I tell you this, what you fear is not our strength. What you fear is our refusal to accept death. What you fear is our determination to live." Christopher thought about his cells. He thought about the viral DNA coded into every part of his body. He thought about his ancestors standing in hospitals during pandemics, caring for the dying. He thought about his ancestors surviving when the odds said they should not survive. "My species has never conquered another world," Kevin said. "My species has never enslaved another species. My species has never tried to dominate the galaxy. We have only tried to survive. We have only tried to live. And the way we survive is by learning, by studying our enemy, by encoding that knowledge into ourselves. Kevin paused. The entire chamber was waiting for him to continue. So yes, Kevin said quietly, we have 8% of our DNA from viruses. Yes, that is higher than most species. Yes, that means humans have genetic advantages in adaptation and immune response. But I ask you, is that a threat to the galaxy? Or is that exactly what the galaxy needs? A species that knows how to survive anything. A species that knows how to study problems and solve them. A species that knows how to care for others, even when we are dying ourselves. President Nine raised a hand. The chamber became silent again. This council will take a recess of 3 hours. We will reconvene to continue this discussion. The delegates began to leave their seats. But many of them stopped and looked at Kevin. Many of them looked at Christopher. Many of them looked at Patricia. They were looking at humanity with eyes that were different now. Not the eyes of delegates looking at a young species that did not belong, but the eyes of delegates looking at something they did not fully understand. That night, Christopher returned to his quarters. He thought about what Kevin had said. He thought about what the council had heard. He thought about the genetic code inside his body, waiting for the future. 3 days after the council emergency session, there was a knock on Christopher's door. It was not a gentle knock. It was a hard, urgent knock. The kind of knock that meant something was wrong. Christopher opened the door. Standing in the hallway was Amanda Richardson. Amanda worked for the council's biodefense division. She was an older woman with gray hair and very serious eyes. Amanda had never come to Christopher's quarters before. Amanda was not someone who did anything without a very good reason. I need to speak with you, Amanda said. It is about a situation that has developed. We need your help. Christopher led her inside. Amanda sat down at the small table in his room. She placed a sealed file on the table. The file was marked with a red symbol that meant confidential and urgent. There is a colony world in the Andromeda sector, Amanda said, without any introduction or soft words. The colony is called New Genesis. It was settled 30 years ago by volunteers from 15 different species. The population is approximately 2 million people. Christopher waited. He could tell there was more. 3 weeks ago, Amanda continued, the colony reported a disease outbreak. The disease is unknown. We do not know where it came from or what causes it. The colony requested medical assistance from the Kepler Council and the Andromedan Collective. Both sent their best doctors and their most advanced medical technology. Amanda paused. She looked very tired. The disease is not responding to any treatment, Amanda said. The fatality rate is 90%. Out of the 2 million colonists, we have already lost more than 500,000. The disease is evolving rapidly. Each day it becomes more deadly. Each day it becomes more resistant to treatment. We can no longer contain it. Christopher felt cold. How many are left? How many are still alive? Approximately 900,000, Amanda said. And the number decreases by thousands every day. The colony will be empty within 2 weeks unless we find a solution. Why are you telling me this? Christopher asked, though he thought he already knew the answer. Amanda opened the sealed file. Inside were images and data. The images showed a virus. Christopher had studied biology. He understood what he was looking at. This virus was different from any virus he had ever seen. The structure was complex. The pattern was strange. We want you to lead a team, Amanda said. We want you to take your best human immunologists and geneticists to the colony. We want you to study this virus. We want you to try to find a treatment. Why humans? Christopher asked. The Zalathians are better at genetic research than any species in the galaxy. The Kepler Council has technology thousands of years more advanced than humanity. Amanda met his eyes directly. Because we think this virus is responding to the treatments we use. Every time we try to fight it with conventional medicine, it adapts. It evolves. It finds a way around our defense. But you have something that the Zalathians and the Kepler Council do not have. You have genetic memory. You have that 8% of your DNA that records how to survive impossible diseases. Christopher understood. The Council had listened to Kevin's speech. The Council had understood that humanity had something unique. And now the galaxy needed it. I will need a team, Christopher said. And I will need their names and records. I need to choose the right people for this mission. Within an hour, Amanda provided him with a complete list of human medical and genetic specialists. There were hundreds of candidates. Christopher spent the next day reviewing each one. He looked at their expertise. He looked at their experience. He looked at their willingness to take risks. By evening, he had selected 20 people. Daniel Cooper was a young immunologist from Stanford University. He had published studies on adaptive immune response. He was brilliant but untested in real situations. Rebecca Martinez was an older scientist. She had spent 40 years studying genetic adaptation. She had published more papers than almost any other human scientist. She was one of the world's experts on how human genetics change over time. Stephen Wright was a genetic modeling specialist. He understood how to build models of genetic systems and predict how they would behave. He could look at a virus and predict how it would evolve. Margaret Kelly was a field doctor. She had served in war zones and disaster areas. She knew how to work in dangerous situations. She knew how to treat patients when conditions were terrible. James Martinez, no relation to Rebecca, was a microbiologist. He could identify and classify bacteria and viruses. He could understand their structure and their behavior. And 15 others. 15 more specialists. 15 more experts. 15 more humans who knew how to survive and adapt. Christopher called them all to a meeting. He told them what the situation was. He told them that they were going to a dying colony. He told them that 900,000 people would die in 2 weeks without their help. He told them that the task was possibly impossible. Every single one of them said yes. They prepared quickly. They loaded equipment and samples and computers. They took genetic databases that contained every disease that humans had ever survived. They took all the knowledge that humanity had, accumulated through thousands of years of plague and death. At the departure gate, Patricia came to say goodbye. Patricia was not going with them. She was staying at the Institute to coordinate support and send data when it was needed. You are going to save them, Patricia said to Christopher. I know you are. Because this is what humans do. We survive. We adapt. We find a way. Christopher hugged her. Then he led his team onto the ship. The journey to the Andromeda sector took 3 days. 3 days in space, watching the stars pass. 3 days thinking about 900,000 people dying. 3 days knowing that the fate of a colony depended on what his team could do. On the 3rd day, Daniel Cooper came to find Christopher in the ship's observation deck. Daniel was looking at the data on his computer. I have been studying the virus structure, Daniel said. Look at this. The virus is not behaving like a normal virus. It is adapting too quickly. Every time the body mounts an immune response, the virus changes. It is like the virus is learning. Christopher looked at the computer screen. Daniel was right. The virus was not just evolving randomly. The virus was changing in response to the body's defense. The virus was studying the immune system and finding ways around it. That is the problem, Christopher said slowly. The virus is learning faster than conventional medicine can adapt. Traditional treatments work at 1 speed. But this virus is changing at a faster speed. Then what do we do? Daniel asked. How do we treat something that learns faster than we can treat it? Christopher thought of his genetic code. He thought of the amber sections that contained knowledge of thousands of years of survival. He thought of his ancestors who had fought plagues without medicine, without technology, without anything but their own bodies and their own minds. We do not try to treat it the way the Kepler Council tried, Christopher said. We treat it the way humans have always treated disease. We teach our immune system to learn. We teach our bodies to study the enemy and respond faster than it can adapt. The ship began to approach the colony world. Below them, New Genesis waited. Below them, 900,000 people were dying. And now, for the first time in the history of the galaxy, an entire world was depending on humanity to save them. The colony's medical station was overcrowded and falling apart. People lay on beds in the hallways because there was no room in the hospital. The air was filled with the smell of sickness and death. Medical robots moved from patient to patient, but they could do nothing. The treatments were not working. The patients were dying. Christopher's team arrived in the middle of chaos. They put on protective equipment and entered the quarantine zones where the sick people were being kept. What they saw was terrible. People from dozens of species lay dying. Some were species that Christopher recognized. Some were species he had never seen before. All of them were suffering. All of them were dying. Rebecca Martinez went directly to the medical data center. She pulled up every treatment that had been tried. She looked at the results. She looked at how the patients had responded. She looked at what had worked and what had failed. She made detailed notes. Daniel Cooper and Stephen Wright went to the laboratory. They examined samples of the virus that the colony's doctors had collected. They looked at the structure. They looked at the genetic code of the virus. They studied how the virus had changed over the 3 weeks of the outbreak. What they found was shocking. The virus was not just one virus. The virus was many viruses. The virus was evolving. Each generation of the virus was different from the previous one. The virus was becoming resistant to every treatment that was used against it. But it was also becoming something more. The virus was becoming organized. The virus was becoming intelligent. This is impossible, Daniel said, staring at his computer screen. The virus should not be able to evolve this fast. The virus should not be able to organize like this. This is like the virus is thinking. This is like the virus is learning and planning. Stephen was running genetic models on his computer. He was trying to understand how the virus could possibly be changing so quickly. The models showed that the virus was not changing randomly. The virus was changing in response to treatments. Every time a doctor tried a drug, the virus adapted to resist that drug. The virus is studying us, Stephen said quietly. Just like we are trying to study the virus is trying to study us. It is learning how our bodies work. It is learning what treatments we are using. And it is changing to survive against those treatments. Margaret Kelly came to them with a problem. The colony is running out of time, she said. The death rate is accelerating. We have maybe 5 days before the situation becomes completely impossible. In 5 days, the virus will have evolved to such a degree that no treatment will work. Christopher gathered his team in a private area. They sat around the table in the small office that the colony had given them. They had access to medical data. They had access to genetic samples. They had access to everything that the colony's doctors had learned about the virus. We cannot treat this virus the way the Kepler Council tried to treat it, Christopher said. He was certain of this. The virus is evolving too quickly. Every drug they create, the virus defeats. Every treatment they try, the virus adapts against. If we keep trying conventional medicine, we will lose. Then what do we do? Asked James Martinez. If conventional medicine does not work, what can possibly work against this virus? Rebecca was looking at the genetic data. She was comparing the virus to the medical records. She was studying what treatments had been tried and how the virus had responded. Then she stopped. She looked up from her computer. "I have seen this pattern before," Rebecca said slowly. "Not in any recent virus, but in old records. In the Black Death, in Spanish flu, in tuberculosis. When human populations faced viruses that were learning and evolving, the only thing that worked was education of the immune system." Stephen understood immediately. We do not teach the body to fight one virus. We teach the body to learn. We teach the immune system to study the enemy and change faster than the enemy can change. Daniel was already looking through the genetic data that humans had brought with them. "We have the genetic records," he said. "We have the records of how humans fought plague. We have the genetic memory of thousands of years of survival against impossible diseases." Christopher looked at the genetic data from the virus. He looked at the genetic records of humans fighting disease. And he saw the pattern. He understood what needed to be done. "We build a treatment," Christopher said. "That is not a drug. It is a therapy that teaches the body's immune system to respond the way human immune systems have learned to respond over thousands of years. We do not give the patients one medicine. We give them a layered response. We teach their immune systems to evolve in response to the virus." Stephen was already building the model. He took the genetic records from human plague survivors. He took the genetic structure of the virus. He began to model how a body's immune system could be trained to fight a learning virus by becoming a learning immune system itself. The work took hours. It took concentration. It took all of the knowledge that humans had accumulated about fighting disease. Finally, Stephen finished the model. "It should work," he said. "According to the model, if we activate these specific genetic pathways in the patients, their immune systems will begin to evolve at the same speed as the virus. Their bodies will be able to study the virus and respond faster than the virus can adapt." "But these are genetic therapies," Margaret said. "We have never tried anything like this before. We have no idea if it will work in real patients." Christopher looked at each member of his team. "We have no choice," he said. "The patients will die without this treatment. At least with this treatment, they have a chance." The colony's doctors were skeptical, but they had nothing to lose. They began administering the treatment. They injected genetic material into the patients' bodies. The genetic material was designed to teach their immune systems to learn and adapt. For the first day, nothing happened. The death rate continued. The virus continued to spread. Then, on the second day, something changed. The patients who had received the treatment began to recover. Slowly at first, then faster. Their immune systems were learning. Their immune systems were studying the virus. Their immune systems were evolving to fight the virus. By the third day, the recovery rate was clear. The patients who received the treatment were surviving. The virus was still spreading among untreated patients, but the treated patients were fighting back. By the fourth day, Christopher's team was treating everyone on the colony. Every person received the genetic therapy. Every person's immune system began to learn. By the fifth day, the death rate had dropped from 90% to 15%. By the sixth day, it had dropped to less than 5%. By the seventh day, the virus was being controlled. The colony was saved. 1 month later, Christopher stood before the Galactic Council again. The chamber was even more crowded than before. Every species wanted to hear what he would say. 900,000 people would have died, Christopher said. His voice was clear and strong. The Kepler Council could not save them. The Andromedan Collective could not save them. The greatest medical technology in the galaxy could not save them. But they were saved. They were saved because humans have that 8% of genetic code from thousands of years of plague and survival. He paused, looking at each representative. That 8% is not debris, Christopher continued. That 8% is an archive. That 8% is the knowledge of every human who survived disease before medicine existed. That 8% is the proof that humanity knows how to survive. Humanity knows how to learn. Humanity knows how to adapt. Christopher pointed to the data displayed on the screen. This is not a lucky accident. This is not a special privilege that humans do not deserve. This is the result of our species refusing to die. This is the result of our ancestors fighting impossible battles and surviving. This is the result of knowledge being passed down through our bodies and our genes. He took a deep breath. I think that 8% of human DNA does not make us a threat to the galaxy, Christopher said. I think it makes us exactly what the galaxy needs. We are a species that knows how to survive. We are a species that can teach other species to survive. We are a species that has the knowledge of countless plagues and diseases and adapting to them. Kevin Baldwin and Patricia Moore were standing in the observation section. They were watching. They were listening. So when you look at humanity, Christopher said to the entire council, I hope you see not a young species that does not belong. I hope you see a species that has suffered and learned. I hope you see a species that is ready to help the galaxy survive whatever challenges come next. The chamber was completely silent. Then the Zalathian delegate stood. The Zalathian was the master of genetics and the most knowledgeable about what Christopher's team had accomplished. I vote to recognize humanity's unique genetic advantage, the Zalathian said. I vote to grant humans equal status in all medical research and genetic programs. I vote to acknowledge that humans have earned a place in this galaxy not through luck, but through the knowledge encoded in their own bodies. One by one, other delegates stood. They voted to accept what humans had done. They voted to recognize human achievement. They voted to welcome humanity as equals in the galactic community. The Andromedan representative stood last. The Andromedan had opposed humanity from the beginning.